All right. Okay, so we are back. Stories at Sundown is back, the 2021 version, season 2. So we haven't been canceled yet. And tonight, my guest is Jill Hinde, Chief Executive Officer. Is that your title, or Executive Director?
Whatever you want to call me. I run the Y.
She's the Grand Poobah of the YMCA, Battle Creek Family YMCA. And this is the third time we've had you.
Come on, Mac. The third time's a charm. I told you that.
Third time's a charm. Well, welcome. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's nice to. I feel like all of our life now is on Zoom, right? So
all of our life or online someplace. Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, we were just talking a little bit. Jill, and in your pattern, you just came on like 2 minutes ago, so I had to sit here and bite my fingernails. And
better late than never. So.
But we were just talking about the YMCA and navigating through COVID. But I'm really thrilled that you're on. And I just want to talk a little bit about you first. I mean, you're a lifer. You grew up in Albion. Your father was the longest serving circuit court judge. Am I right about that? Yeah. In county history, Judge Kingsley. He passed away, a couple years ago?
Yeah, 6 years.
Wow. It's hard to believe, isn't it? So much time. But talk a little bit about how you came to be where you're at. Have you been with the YMCA for a long time?
Yeah, it's kind of it's funny. Well, first of all, when I went away to college, I grew up in Albion, obviously, and I live there now. But when I went away to college, I said, I'm not going to come back to Albion and County and go elsewhere in the world. Yeah. And you never say never, because here I am, right? Almost 30 years later. But I didn't, and I certainly, if you'd asked me what I was going to do in college, I wouldn't have told you run a Y. I'm not sure that would have been on the radar screen.
Right.
But I really came into the Y through community programming. So that's what I started doing here. Came back with literacy and adult literacy, and then kind of that being the assistant director, and then the CEO in 2014.
Okay. Well, and that's where you and I really got to know each other, was working in the literacy area.
Right.
Yeah, our paths never really crossed much before that, but we worked in high school equivalency acquisition and tutoring, and I don't. I support your efforts with some of the stuff we do at the library, but.
Right. I've been pretty passionate about that. I think that's one of the things that's interesting to me about a Y, is that it's a membership organization, but then it's also a mission-driven organization. So you're able to do kind of both of those pieces. There's that customer service angle, and then there's really that community outreach that I think is so compelling.
Yeah, I love the Y. And I just confessed to you that I haven't been back since last spring, but I've continued to pay my dues, because I just think that I so much believe in the Y's mission. I just don't want to wear a mask while I work out.
Right.
But I go running, so
right.
It's not quite the same. I'm not a bodybuilder, as anybody who looks at me can tell.
Right. No, me either. So.
But I kind of grew up in a YMCA. I mean, I was there I was a gym rat. I was, and something you said to me when we were first getting to know each other about the work in the literacy arena was your philosophy around what it means to be a nonprofit in a community, and the obligation that you see that a nonprofit has to the community. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Do I need to remember what I said to you then?
No, you don't have to remember it. You can just respond.
I think what it means, it's evolved to me in 2020, obviously. And I think, you read a lot, you read the word servant leader a lot.
Yeah.
And I really have taken that to heart, I think more so in the past year than I had in the past. But it is something that I think if you run a nonprofit organization or you work for one, I think you're really called on to try to do what you can to make your corner of the world better. And so I think that that's what, that's been the goal. And that should be the goal, right? Is to be this mission-driven outreach organization where we're trying to impact lives under the pillars of the WISE mission. And I take that seriously. It's my, I love our members. They keep the lights on, they keep the doors open. But I'm equally as passionate about the community work that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's one of the things, that's why I support the Y. I mean, you have members, and it's a membership driven organization, and I have members, but you do a lot for people who can't afford memberships as well.
Right. If we do that we want to, the goal is accessibility, right? And to remove barriers for people. And I think that that's one of the things that we work really hard to do.
Yeah. So for somebody who's not familiar with the YMCA, they might think of it as a gym, and it is. It's a big piece of it, fitness and stuff. But what would be some of the things that some of our listeners might be surprised to learn that the YMCA offers?
I think adult literacy for one. I think we're the, along with Michigan Works, we're the largest GED testing site in Battle Creek. We do adult basic education in GED prep. So we help people get ready to take the GED. Yeah. We have a 4-star preschool program. And then we also have a GSRP, Great Start Readiness program. What else do we do? We do swim lessons. We partner with Operation Fit to go into the schools. We do before and after school care at Fremont Elementary. We hand out diapers. That was new in COVID. We have handed out 200,000 diapers since March. And, and then in addition to kind of the normal, normal pre-COVID world, right? So the Cereal Soup Classic and the Turkey Trot, those events that had to be virtual this year. So really, we do programming that runs from kids to seniors. So it's kind of a really interesting little universe here.
Yeah. For a while, you may probably not doing it now after the pandemic, but you had the midnight basketball or the late night basketball. Is that?
Yep. That will start again when the governor's restrictions on right now, the number of people who can be in one place working out together is prohibitive for them. So waiting for those restrictions to ease. We can be open at 25% capacity, but that precludes, tennis, racquetball, basketball,
yoga.
No yoga. Exactly.
I'm waiting for the yoga to come back.
Someone can lobby the governor. So, I was hopeful. I think her habit, isn't it, to speak on Tuesdays and Thursdays? And I was hopeful this week that she would announce maybe a little bit of a loosening of restrictions. But I've been wrong every time I try to predict what's going to happen. So,
well, it just fluctuates. The data fluctuates. I watch the readout every day, and we're going down, we're going up, we're going up, we're going up, we're going down, we're going down.
It's funny. We closed our doors on March 16th, and if you had told me, none of us knew what we didn't know, right, when this started. But I would have been shocked, I think, to know that we would still be where we are in January.
Yeah.
In the winter, spring of 21, right? I think I didn't envision this going that long.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a year ago, right? So we know what we didn't know. But, we've come a long way to not come very far.
We've gotten really good at those precautions, haven't we?
We have for sure.
Yeah, I have to say, the library has not been open to the public since the last surge, but we were open for the public for quite a while, and kind of proud to say that not one. We've had people that have been exposed, and we've had people that have had COVID, but none of that has happened in the library, which the masks work, the disinfecting works, the distancing works, those sorts of things.
I'm gonna knock on wood when I say it, but we haven't. I think we've had 2 different members who had COVID. One in September, right after we opened, and one in November, and there was no spread. So
Yeah.
We worked really hard.
Yeah. And I want to. We won't spend the whole half hour talking about COVID, I promise. But a little bit about what it's like to have been navigating this. I mean, obviously, very prominent in the news. A lot of gym owners in the private sector have been very upset. They feel that they can navigate without being closed, and of course, they were closed for a long time. And you mentioned that since the closure, you lost about 1,000 members, but
1,000 and gained 500 ish.
Yeah, that's pretty good, I'd say.
I had no idea what to expect, honestly. Right. And it's really gratifying that people have stuck with us.
Yeah,
through this.
Well, and I mean, people are paying their dues, and
right, exactly. Yeah. Keeping the doors open and
keeping the doors open.
I think that's where we were lucky in that 2 things. Number one, a Y is more than a gym. And I think that people connect with that mission. We talked about the nonprofit and the mission. And then also I think we I sat here at the same desk on March 16th and kind of watched this, tsunami coming of closures, right? And they had started to shut down nationally, and it became apparent that, the governor was going to close or, issue the stay-at-home order. And I think that, I made a decision. It was like, okay, do I close the doors and just hope for the best, or do we really throw ourselves into this community work and see what happens? And I think that for me was a turning point, and that's what's been able to sustain us.
Yeah, we've all learned a lot about how we continue the mission that the work that we're in this whole new set of circumstances. I mean, this program was an effort to try to keep conversation about books alive, try to keep community together. It's a little bit different. It stretched us, it challenged us.
Well, I think that's one
still challenging us.
People, we're all so hungry for human contact, right? And I think that's when I told you, I think it was before we we are busy tonight at the Y, and that's the one advantage to work with the Splendid, because you have a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. And I think even I cut out.
You're cutting out, Jill. Which is one of the challenges that we navigate during all this internet access.
Exactly.
Broadband.
Buildings are not conducive to good internet connections.
No. So let's see. One more question about the Y, and then we got to talk about books, and because you're like library user extraordinaire, or at least talk about a book. But right up until the closure, and since you've been the director, there's been a lot going on at the library. I'm sorry, at the YMCA. Massive improvements to equipment. What's coming when things open up again?
A second. I heard cut out.
Yeah, it's not cooperating with us tonight.
I heard you were there.
Yeah, I'm here. So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, maybe log out and come back in. You want to try that? Leave and come right back in. And so while we're waiting for Jill to get back, as I was saying, Jill typically has a whole shelf of holds at Willard Library. You can put a hold on a book, and I don't know how she reads so much, although she confessed to me that she's quite a skimmer as well. But we're gonna see. And let's see.
All right.
There. Yeah, a little bit. Well, let's try it.
Are you asking what's coming at the Y?
Yeah. You've done a lot to improve the Y. You've overhauled the equipment. You put new boilers in. I mean, and the Y, that Y building is huge.
And I think I told them installed when I was in kindergarten, and that was, so it was high time. We put parking lot. I think that a yoga studio, I guess I can't. I'm really into the yoga studio.
Yeah.
We used our time off or when we just had kids here, community here, to paint and refresh and I think it's the cleanest it's ever been, so it's a good thing.
Well, that is a good thing. Yeah. So let's just jump in and talk a little bit about books. And when you were off, I was just telling everybody how many books you seem to go through. I mean, it's like the Jill Hinde
shelf.
Shelf, exactly.
Well, I have a Kindle. I just don't use it. And my husband is always like, seriously, more books. And I only put them on hold. I don't come and browse the shelves anymore, even though I enjoy doing that. Not just because of clothes, but I read what I see, in the media, in, book lists. And I put them on hold. And, I think your staff, when they have to get my books, are like, not her again.
No, not at all.
And, if we drive, 10 on the way there and 10 on the way back. So Anyway, I'm a book nerd.
Yeah. So one book we both enjoyed a lot, and I think it's really pertinent to talk about. And I wish I had a copy to hold up and show
Right.
the viewers, but they're all out. The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson, and which is an account of Winston Churchill's first year as Prime Minister of Britain in the lead up to World War II.
Right.
And there's been so much written about Winston Churchill. I mean, what else could possibly be written? But this book was just so gripping. I mean, it really read like a novel.
Right.
And I think that the real study, and I think it's so apt today, was just the leadership that Winston Churchill was able to manifest during this really, really uncertain time. I mean, we think we're in uncertain times now. But this was when the prospect of Hitler ruling all of Europe was not far-fetched.
Right. No, there are definitely parallels, I think, on many levels with some of the things that we're going through today, not only with leadership, but with COVID. And it was interesting to me. I've read quite a bit about Churchill, and so I like Erik Larson, so it's like,
yeah, it's
a no-brainer to pick this book up. But I really didn't know that. I hadn't read a lot about the Second World War and about the Blitz, and so it was interesting to me to read, that perspective and his. The word that comes to mind is bullheadishness, right? But I mean, he was very. He was just, determined, and he stayed the course. And I think that that was just interesting to me to read about his concept of leadership and the determination, and failure is not an option.
Yeah. And, and yet he was I don't know how to put it. I mean, I have a few excerpts. Well, I'll read something that Erik Larson wrote about or said about him in an interview. His obvious courage and confidence, which arose from that mysterious thing we called character. He was ever aware of the power of symbolic action, of demonstrating courage and confidence at all times, even in small ways, visiting bombed out cities as fires burned, rushing to the nearest rooftop to witness an air raid in progress, striding through city streets as bombs fell. Even his refusal to call Hitler by his name was part of the picture. Churchill called him that man or that bad man as a subtle way of diminishing him. And then his speeches, which most people can quote, even though they don't know when he gave the speeches.
Right.
But his best speeches were at the earliest days of when it looked really bleak.
Right. The Germans never give up. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the Germans expected Britain to surrender because they were just under siege, and he just refused to do that.
It's just, I mean, that's part of the enduring legacy, right? It's just what was and again, bullheaded. I mean, unyielding, I guess, is a better word, right? I mean,
and he was, and he also had no illusions. Actually, one of the things that I kept thinking about when I read this book was Good to Great. Have you read that book? Everybody's read that book. If you're in business, you've read that book. But the Stockdale paradox, this idea of the comment that the author that Stockdale made was that the optimists were the ones who failed, the ones who always said it'll be better by Easter. We've gone through that, right?
Exactly.
As soon as the sun comes out, everything will be fine. Summer's going to be great, and your optimism just gets worn down. So optimism was a fatal flaw, but you don't confuse that with your absolute conviction that you will prevail in the end.
Right.
And this was Churchill, 20 some years before Stockdale was in prison in Vietnam to come up with that.
And I think he believed that, I mean, I think there was just something in him that, again, refused to ponder the thought of losing.
Yeah.
And even though because a lot of I think you referenced it when you talked about him, the quote where he walked among the streets during the bombings. And I think a great deal of time, like going up on the roof to watch when the bombers would fly in, and it was also interesting. He wanted to be among it or part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of his appeal as a leader as well.
Well, and he also had this weird contradiction in him, is that I think he loved war. I mean, he didn't love war in the sense of the bloodshed and the heartache and the tragedy, and he would get very emotional in his when he talked about what the suffering that people went through. But at the same time, he really relished that conflict and that use of power and that pursuit. In other words, he felt like he was uniquely equipped to make these decisions. And
right.
And
okay, them.
And obviously the voters in Britain agreed because I mean, obviously it's not the same thing as a U.S. election, but he was embraced as a leader during wartime, but he was rejected soon after the war was over, right?
Right.
So
and then I had to craft a new. I think it was really. I don't know if it was. I don't recall if. Did Splendid and the Vile end with? You read it more recently than I did. The Blitz.
Yeah. Well, the Blitz is. They have survived. They've come out on the other side of the Blitz, and it's when he's. And in fact, I do have one little excerpt that I'm going to read, but. It takes you to that entire first year.
Right. Okay.
And I mean, think about it. I mean, like, think of the trauma that this country went through on September 11. One day, they had 50 some days of consecutive bombing.
And I think you talked about it when we parallels to there are, in some ways it feels like we've been under siege for a year. And it's ebbed and flowed, but it's been this constant. And I think that, no matter your politics in this, and COVID has become so divisive, but it's, I think everyone deals with it in their own way, but it's exhausting, right? To have that constant threat, sense of threat.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that's somewhat what Britain felt like.
Yeah. I don't know if you notice when I get comments, I put them up on the screen. So
right.
You comments. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. One of the funny things throughout the book was the courtship of FDR, because Churchill knew that the only way that they could prevail was if the United States entered the war, and there was such strong isolationist tendencies in the United States at the time. And Joseph Kennedy, who father of John F. Kennedy, was the ambassador to the United Kingdom. And he had very low opinion of Churchill, and he didn't want the United States involved. So, that's just a common thread that goes throughout this. But so much of the book is really funny. And this
Churchill too.
He was hilarious.
A great wit,
just
right?
the description of the stuff he wore.
Right.
The guy was unbelievable. But so this was after the United States, committed, and Churchill and his secretary were staying in the White House. And so Churchill stayed at the White House with Secretary Martin and several others, and got a close-up look at Roosevelt's own secret circle. Roosevelt, in turn, got a close-up look at Churchill. The first night Churchill and members of his party spent in the White House, Inspector Thompson, also one of the house guests, was with Churchill in his room, scouting various points of danger, when someone knocked at the door. At Churchill's direction, Thompson answered and found the president outside in his wheelchair, alone in the hall. Thompson opened the door wide, then saw an odd expression come over the president's face as he looked into the room behind the detective. I turned, Thompson wrote. Winston Churchill was stark naked, a drink in one hand, a cigar in the other. The president prepared to wheel himself out. Come on in, Franklin, Churchill said. We're quite alone. The president offered what Thompson called an odd shrug, then wheeled himself in. You see, Mr. President, Churchill said, I have nothing to hide. That's the best Churchill impression that I can give. But the book is just full of little anecdotes, and it's actually it's seeing a resurgence right now, and it's been a bestseller for a long time, and it's actually coming back a little bit, because I think it speaks so much to this sense of this yearning for the kind of leadership that can really pull people together in a difficult time. And he was obviously successful. Because I don't think most of us today recognize just how precarious the whole world order that we ended up with after the war was.
It's funny. I was thinking about my grandfather fought in World War II, and he was in Sicily, and it was interesting. He had a shrapnel wound in his arm, and you could fit a fingertip in kind of what was, we called it a hole in his arm. It's probably more like a dent, an indentation. But it's interesting to have heard his stories and see what is played out again in the United States, and after reading Splendid and Vile, and just looking at that leadership and what they overcame in 1942, 43, 44, maybe 42, right? Earlier?
I think 41.
Well, yeah, because it was Pearl Harbor that pushed, and Churchill was actually, maybe it's not good to call him happy, but he was actually glad that the United States would then get involved in the conflict. But it's interesting to look at that, and so much of that is lost in history.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I've been thinking about my grandfather a lot and his service in World War II.
So, well, I appreciate you coming on, Jill. I'm sorry that technology hasn't been working so well tonight. And I apologize to anybody who's been following along. They stuck with us, though.
Thank you so much. And it was great to join you. And it's a great book. And I think I have books on hold that I probably need
If
to
you're
go
ever looking for something to read, come down to the library, look in the H's on the hold shelf, and Jill's got a pretty good list there. So
I try to cross all genres. So
yeah. In fact, when you first came on, you couldn't decide on a book to talk about. So we were just going to talk about reading.
no, exactly.
But I think we'd have needed more time.
Probably would. Yes, exactly.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. And, next week, we do not have, as you can tell, Stories at Sundown has moved to Mondays. It'll be at 7 o'clock on Mondays, and we're going to stick with that. A few of you complained that we jumped around a little bit. But this is it, 2021, Monday night evenings at 7 o'clock. Except for one night a week, the third week of each month, we are going to do Peeks into the Past, Tales of Battle Creek, which is a history program. And so next week, we're going to do a program on Irving Park, which is really fascinating. But then the week after that, we come back with another episode of Stories at Sundown, and my guest is Jeremy Andrews. And Jeremy and I will talk about a lot, I'm sure. I'll try to make sure he cleans it up a little bit. Just kidding, Jeremy. But one of the books that we spent a lot of time on, actually I read it months ago now, preparing for Jeremy, was Jack Kerouac's On the Road, which is a fantastic read. If you have time between now and then, pick it up and read it and chime in on the conversation. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight. Jill, stay on. Don't leave. But everybody else, have a good night and stay warm, and hope to see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
That's